Is your IEP still useful during this government shutdown and the decimation of OSEP? What is OSEP and how does that work? Well, this video, I'm going to talk about OSEP, what that is, and the bigger picture, as well as your IEP and its relevance in today's climate with the current government shutdown and the decimation of special education in the United States. So if you have a lot of these questions and you need clarification, I want you to stay with me in this video, and I have a specific article that I'm referencing that I'll put in my description. All right, so the big question, like I said, is as a parent or even as a student, is the IEP still valid and recognized in the education systems? As of right now, yes. The more complicated component, though, is that to what extent is it actually going to be recognized? That's, I think, the bigger problem here. And I'll pull back and explain this a little bit more. Effectively speaking, OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs, is dead. It's gone. So this leaves a giant hole and big question mark in the world of education and in special education as to what's going to happen next, who is actually doing any of the work and doing any of the oversight, and are any people with disabilities still going to be supported? So let's start with what OSEP is, what their functions are, or were, I should really be saying in the past tense at this point, and then I'll move on to your child's IEP. So there's been a lot of talk about Trump and his admin gutting the U.S. Department of Education, and I'll talk about the history of that in a second, but to clarify things, there's the overarching office, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, and then housed within that is OSEP. OSERS is the much bigger umbrella organization. So they are the ones overseeing OSEP. They're focused more on policy change, and its communication. OSEP is involved more with the day-to-day stuff. So if you as the parent or teacher had a question regarding special education law or policy, you'd most likely reach out to someone in OSEP to get that guidance. Part of the overall funding from OSEP involves providing technical training and support for educators as well as parents. Now, one of the big concerns involving special education, but specifically involving OSEP, is a concept known as free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. FAPE is essential, like least restrictive environments are, for special education. It comes in response to a lot of the historical mistreatment of people with disabilities. So OSEP's mission is to improve outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth of all kinds with disabilities to ensure that they have access to free and public education. And all of this is established under the education law, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, or IDEA. And IDEA is what establishes special education. What's really great about this structure was that it involves early intervention, Part C, so birth to the age of 3, and then special education ages 3 to 21, Part B. So that is specifically housed under OSEP, is overseeing parts B and C of IDEA. But they're also involved in monitoring things like state compliance with federal special education law, providing guidance, resource, and technical assistance to states, districts, educators, and families. So like I said before, if you had a question, if the person in your school district had a question about policy and how to do something, they'd have to call and most likely speak to someone through OSEP. They're also involved in distributing federal funds to states for special education programs, as well as supporting national initiatives and data collection to improve special education outcomes and equity. And that's another gigantic concern and question mark on top of what is already a very large concerning question mark involving Title I schools, low-income schools, or schools that house at least 40% of kids who qualify as being low income, on top of special education support and services, or IDEA. So if OSEP essentially does not exist, is that also true for education law like IDEA? Yes and no. No, IDEA exists. Right now, it still exists. It was enacted by Congress, and it would have to be either repealed or rewritten in order for it to be gone or changed. So yes, the laws are still on the books involving free, appropriate public education, IEPs, safeguards, evaluations, all of that stuff still exists on the books. Problem, as you would imagine, is there's no one really there to enforce it or to monitor for it. So the backing of the federal government to ensure that districts are upholding their responsibilities is not there. So one of the big questions is, how did this even happen? Like, why is this happening now? Well, realistically speaking, since its inception in 1980, the Department of Education has been under fire from Republicans in the GOP that entire time. Ronald Reagan campaigned on dismantling it or reducing its funding. A lot of critics of the DOE have argued that it is unconstitutional and provides too much governmental oversight into education, and that this is more of a state-by-state basis. It's a states' rights issue, essentially, that the funding should come from the state and be given specifically to those local districts. They can essentially handle the cultural milieu, if you will, of their own students and families. Part of what's also kind of poisoned the water hole is that there's been a lot of culture war rhetoric and misinformation or straight up lying happening. Think of kids with kitty litter boxes in schools, which isn't real. So a lot of parents have been primed to kind of vote against their own child's best interest, thinking that they're engaged in this battle for their child's well-being, when in reality, this is the other side of what they essentially championed to happen, not knowing that that was going to happen. So there's been a long-standing history of the GOP looking to eradicate the DOE. However, on March 20th, Trump signed an executive order improving education outcomes by empowering parents, states, and communities. That order directs the Secretary of Education, in this case, Linda McMahon, to take, quote, all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return many functions to states and other agencies. My guess is that other agencies means HHS, but we're not sure yet. That hasn't been confirmed as of yet. I hope not, but we don't know. But because of the inefficiency, because of the perceived governmental overreach, if you throw in some gender ideology and some other culture war stuff, it really confuses people as to what's actually happening and where the money actually is going. However, it was also noted that a president's executive order does not have a unilateral ability to just abolish a department within the government. Because it was created by Congress, this comes down to a congressional decision, as it were, kind of like the educational law IDEA. There was a first round of mass firings that occurred. Prior to or concurrent with the EO, a reduction in force was declared on March 11, 2025, affecting roughly half of the Department of Education's workforce, roughly half. So at the time when these RIFs first started coming, there were roughly 4,300 employees in the Department of Education. So we already see half of the workforce cut out on that day or around that time. Throw in about 600 additional employees took a buyout, so they're now out as well. And then after that, RIF notices emerged amid government shutdown this October. So the recent filing, 466 employees, specifically in the departments overlooking special education, received RIF notices as well, essentially leaving next to no one in those offices. So as a parent, you're probably sitting here wondering, well, what's going to happen? What happens next? Is my child's IEP still valid? The answer is yes. The education law IDEA still exists on the books. The problem is, like I said, there is no one there to enforce it at the federal level. So if your school district, a specific teacher, an administrator, someone decides not to even acknowledge the IEP or to follow the goals set within it, your basis of recourse is very limited at this point right now. So if you want to air a grievance, if you want to file a complaint, there is effectively no one available in this department to hear or help anything. This also includes a lot of the technical assistance centers that were funded and provided by OSEP are also gone, meaning phone calls and emails effectively are just going to bounce around, if at all, probably never going to be answered. This also includes the distribution of information and policy and clarifications on policy, because again, everything's written in like legalese, so who even understands that stuff if you're not a lawyer? So in order to get clarification and insight as to procedurally how things are supposed to go, at this point, like I said, it's basically good luck to you. Now, the other question obviously comes down to, as the parent or educator, what do I do? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. Primary thing you can do is to keep all written means of communication, data collection, logs, reports, get everything in writing. If it's not written down, as you probably already know, if there is no paper trail, it didn't exist, it didn't happen. So get all of these things in writing and keep copies of everything. Do not assume that there is OSEP or any other kind of overseers at this point to help you or to keep track or monitor for anything. In addition, you can also find and should probably involve yourself in parental advocacy groups. You can find them online. This might actually be especially helpful for a lot of you new parents to special education. Perhaps your child was diagnosed recently and you're getting involved for the very first time. It's very easy to not know or understand the policy, procedure, or educational laws in general. There are also going to be parents who will intrinsically be on your side because they've probably been fighting this good fight for many years. Get involved in your local and statewide communities, and also let the policymakers know. Let them know by email and by phone call. They do keep the statistics on these things. Call them and ask them for accountability. What are you doing in the interim? How is my child's IEP going to be supported and upheld? What are you doing essentially to help make sure that the flow of time and funding and support maintains itself? So to break all this down, your child's IEP still exists, if nothing else in name only. I don't know. The education law IDEA still exists. The departments that oversee these educational laws and help with compliance and monitoring don't exist. I'm not going to say you're completely on your own, but do not assume that there's anyone available that's going to help you, at least right now. Parents need to band together. They need to make their voices heard, and we really need to be showing up en masse when it comes time for voting. Basically, anyone running at the local or state level in your area should know and be hearing your voice about your concerns and frustrations with the recent developments happening in the Department of Education, specifically with special ed. Like I said, I'm going to continue to publish content whenever I find new information and want to relay that and share that with you. But again, let me know in the comments what you think. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Let's collect and pool our resources here too. But until next time, good luck to you. Stay safe. And I'm hoping that this is over sooner than later.